This was a transformative experience in the first degree, and at first I wasn't aware of what is could possibly be happening. I thought I'd tell you a story about how tragedy led to the most important day of my life. I was working in California as a survey research sociologist for one of the regional state universities, and I came home for Christmas in 2000 to visit my elderly parents and my friends. And my dad had been in the hospital with a lung infection, but they had got him on antibiotics, got him cleared up, and got him back home. Mom was holding her own at an assisted care facility out in the county. And no sooner did I get home than my dad wanted to start talking about the will and how he wanted things set up. My stepmother Josie had been with my dad for 14 years, and she'd been taking good care of him. And he wanted me to be sure to set things up so that she could stay in the house for as long as she was able. And he made me promise him that I'd look after her. So about 4 or 5 days went by, and we're coming up on Christmas, and I'll be darned if both my parents didn't end up in the hospital. Mom got a urinary tract infection. Dad's lung infection came back. And they both died within 10 days of each other the following month in January. So I called my boss and told him what happened, and I settled both of the estates, got Josie set up in the house the way Dad wanted, and I went back to work. And things went along fine for about a year until one day I called up and to talk to Josie and found out that her arms and her shoulders were hurting her so bad that she'd get out to the kitchen sink and she couldn't turn the faucet on or off. And she said she was having trouble getting in and out of bed, and she wasn't sure if she got to the bathroom whether she'd be able to get back to bed. So this sounded bad enough. I jumped in the car and I drove straight home. So I got back home and found out she had cancer of the uterus. She was seeing some horse doctor in a walk-in clinic out here in the county, and so I got her a good internist and found out that she had a condition called polymyalgia rheumatica, which is an inflammation in the arteries in your neck and your head. And the worry is that it'll cut the blood flow off to the optic nerve and cause her to go blind. So the treatment for that is to put her on massive doses of prednisone, which they did. So I got her scheduled for surgery at the cancer center in Seattle, Fred Hutchinson, good place. And they did a hysterectomy and got rid of the cancer. We got it all. That was the good thing. But for the next 6 months, I was flying one way or the other. I'd go back to work and I'd work for a week, then I'd fly back up here and I'd take care of Josie for a week, and then I'd fly back to work for a week, and I'd come back up and take care of her for a week, and that went on for 6 months. Unfortunately, the prednisone started causing compression fractures in Josie's spinal column. So she was getting a series of cervical compression fractures. Fortunately, they were able to do a procedure and get her out of the hospital pretty quick. So finally, I told my boss, I said, I got to go home and take care of her. I just decided that it was the best thing to do. It was a tough decision because it meant sacrificing my career to take care of Josie, but that's what my dad wanted me to do. I promised him, and so I thought, well, that's the best thing. That's what I want to do. So I moved back up, and I bought the house from the other two heirs who had been pressuring me to make Josie move in with her sister down in Wyoming. They wanted me to sell the house. I bought them out, got them out of the picture. I put a studio apartment in the basement and moved in to take care of her. And basically sacrificed my life for Josie. I didn't realize it at the time, but it became a form of selfless service, of seva, what the Hindus call seva. Over the next 10 years, I saw Josie through countless hospitalizations, 6 surgeries, 2-month-long nursing home stays, and more. I ended up putting a hospital bed up in the living room and put a commode next to the bed, and uh, when things were rough, I couldn't sleep downstairs. I had to move upstairs into the bedroom and take care of her up there. But I had that little studio apartment in the basement, and when she was able, I could stay down there, and it worked out okay. That worked out all right. Well, 10 years after I had moved up to take care of Josie, I was in the apartment and I was thinking very seriously, pondering with a lot of effort and concentration on the nature of political polarization in the United States, and wondering how it was that people in the country on various sides of the political divide can believe things that are absolutely unsupported by any available empirical evidence whatsoever, and which on the face of it seem almost pathological, almost deranged, some of these beliefs. When suddenly, very suddenly, out of the blue, the thought occurred to me that, well, these are just all thoughts. And then it occurred to me that mine are also just thoughts. Very suddenly, my sense of a separate self fell away, and my mind became truly silent for the first time in my life. And my field of awareness, my perceptual field opened up, and I suddenly was as if looking at the world anew through the eyes of a child, without the overlay or filter of any intervening mental concepts or fabrications or thoughts or interpretations, or the field of awareness is wide open. And perceptual, my colors, perceptions of colors were bright, and this was a transformative experience in the first degree. And at first I wasn't aware of what could possibly be happening to me. It was a wondrous experience. Deep bliss, peace, inner peace and calm. I could close my eyes, still can do it, and look within, and the depths of stillness within are completely bottomless. Or expand your awareness into basically infinity. The sense of a separate self, it is the distinction between subject and object, completely evaporated. There's the field of awareness, there was no separation, no boundaries, no divisions between inside and outside. Everything is a unity, is one, completely unified. Everywhere I looked, I could see God. I could see the divine in all things. In the child hopping and skipping across the grass, chasing the ball, I could see God. I could see the divine in everything. And there was this union of bliss with these perceptions of the divine. And I would look at the trees around me and realize that there's a creative life force. The universe is pouring into the art of creation and is giving rise to all of this abundant life in the universe, and that I too am a part of this, and that there's no division, no separation. So some profound insights begin to arise over time. The kind of flashiness of the experiences begin to subside, but that's when things from the past that I hadn't resolved started to come to the surface and demand that they be dealt with. I had to, for example, forgive people that had injured me in the past and realize that they were completely blameless, that they were really doing the best that they could under the circumstances of their lives. And uh, so that enabled me to let go and release these resentments that I had been carrying with me all my life and free me. It was like a weight being lifted off my shoulders, so you could breathe easy and rest easy in the bliss of awareness, of consciousness. So I'm absolutely convinced that my love and compassion for Josie were instrumental in my awakening. My selfless service for her, the sacrifices that I made, all of this played into it. When we selflessly help others, we're actually helping ourselves in ways we can't possibly comprehend. Because I think it's what led to my awakening. It broke down the barriers of the egoic self sufficiently that it allowed the awakening to happen. There's an old expression you'll hear on Buddha at the Gas Pump from Rick Archer. He says, awakening may be an accident, but spiritual practices make you accident prone, and I'm convinced that selfless service or seva is one of those practices. Eventually, thoughts began to intrude, and the sense of a separate self began to creep in and obscure the sense of awareness and bliss that I had been experiencing. And this set me on a 10-year odyssey, a search. I first started reading widely in a variety of spiritual traditions, Hinduism, Sufism, Buddhism, Theravadan Buddhism, Zen, Confucianism, but I finally settled on Tibetan Buddhism because I felt that it was the most complete canon of traditional literature available. The scriptures are extensive, and there are very many good English translations now. And Tibetan Buddhism seemed to me the least adulterated by history of any of the other spiritual traditions. It had only been introduced to the West since about 1960 or so, early 60s, and really only extensively since the 70s or 80s. Jungpa Rinpoche was one of the first to come over. But at any rate, I didn't know where to begin. Tibetan Buddhism is a broad, extensive, like I say, the volumes are hundreds of thousands of pages long in just the Tangyur alone. So I started reading pretty widely in that area, and Tibetan Buddhism in general. I decided that I would focus on the Nyingma tradition, the Nyingma school within Tibetan Buddhism, and I would focus on the Dzogchen teachings within the Nyingma tradition. And so that's what I did. I started reading everything I could find. I probably read, I would guess, hundreds of volumes in the intervening 10 years. Because, like I say, the scope of Tibetan Buddhism is so broad and so varied that in order to just get an overview and a comprehensive, fairly comprehensive overview of the landscape, I felt like I needed to read very, very, very many books. And so I did. Some of the most enlightening books, I could say, were books written by the ancient masters, Padmasambhava, Guru Rinpoche, Tsongkhapa, Milarepa. These books have all been, very many of them, and not all, very many of them have been translated into English. I also read very many of the contemporary masters in Tibetan Buddhism and the Nyingma school, Tulku Jurgen Rinpoche, Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, and others. who were widely respected and highly renowned and very prolific writers who produced a series of volumes that have been translated now into English and are available. So, without becoming a formal Buddhist and without uh, going to a Buddhist center somewhere and donning the robes and becoming a monk, say, or something like this, or becoming a Nagpa, I read on my own and read very widely on my own and incorporated the teachings into my own understanding and practiced. I did extensive practices on my own. The small town I live in has no Buddhist center here. The closest is about 100 miles away in Vancouver, BC, and then there's another in Seattle, which is pretty well respected, but it's in a different tradition, a different school than Enigma. So I just worked on my own, and over a period of time, I achieved stability in my awareness and integrated my awareness into my daily life so that there's a seamless, there's no juxtaposition, there's a unified experience within my daily life. This doesn't mean, of course, that the egoic self completely goes away, though what I like to say is that the ego wants to be in the driver's seat. It wants to be driving the car. It wants to be in control and taking you where it wants to go. And about the best you can hope for is to get the ego to relax enough to go and sit in the back seat while you take over and drive the car. And but you have to be very vigilant because the ego is poised and ready to jump into the front seat at a moment's notice. And sometimes it doesn't when you least expect it. Uh, there are some pitfalls along the way, like spiritual pride. If you start thinking a little bit too highly of yourself, boom, the next thing you know, the ego can be right back there again. And then it takes you a while to relax and get it to calm down enough to go and sit in the back seat where you want it. I would say that in the last 10 years, 15, 10, 13 years since my awakening, I can count the number of times I've been really angry on one hand. This is one of the signs of progress on a spiritual path, is when your negative emotions begin to wane and the frequency of emotional uprisings, disruptions, emotional defilements, however you want to think of them, as the Tibetans think of them as emotional obscurations to awakening or to awareness. When they begin to subside and the positive virtues and emotions begin to flower, then the ratio of the balance between the negative and the positive is one of the sure signs that you're making progress on the spiritual path. And but it happened to me again just the other day. I was almost triggered when a woman accused me of being falsely accused me, I should say, of thinking that she was being mean. And I didn't think anything of the kind. And my temper began to flare. I was almost triggered. And the beauty of awareness is that you get to the point where you can see the negative emotions begin to arise within you and you can counter them by applying an antidote or something. So in this case, I realized that she is suffering herself very deeply. And that instead of becoming angry with her, I need to be compassionate toward her and understanding. And so empathy begins to arise rather than anger. And then you can avoid the entanglement of becoming caught up in your negative emotions. This is very important. So I just wanted to share this story with you, give you a sense of what had happened to me and where I'm coming from. Something else I didn't tell you. I had my awakening in 2010, and then a few years later, after Josie died, I had compiled a collection, 400 pages, of material from the readings that I had been doing in Tibetan Buddhism and in other traditions. And I compiled them into a notebook, a big 3-ring binder notebook. And I decided to completely unencumber myself of all possessions. I sold the house. I sold everything I owned. I sold all my dad's stuff. I sold all my stepmother's stuff. I had all my grandparents' stuff. Uh, it took 8 months to get rid of everything. I found 26 cans of old spark plugs in the garage that my dad had saved when he had changed the spark plugs in the engines over the year. He would say, I remember helping him. He would say, put those over there in that can. We never know when we might have to clean them up and use them over again. But the truth is, he never put a used spark plug back in an engine in his life. There they were, all 26 of them. That's the kind of thing I had to deal with. The attic was completely packed. All the outbuildings were full. 3-car garage was full to the brim. I had 8 garage sales, 8 trips to the garbage dump. By the time I got rid of all that stuff and I sold everything I owned and I sold the house, I felt completely liberated. And I bought a van and I converted it into a little camper and I took off and I traveled for the next 4 years around the western United States. Spent 4 winters in the desert of Arizona. And I took the manual, my 3-ring binder with me and practiced every day for 4 years. And integrated my awakening into my everyday life so that, like I say, there's a seamless experience between the awareness and the contents of my inner and external perceptions. Since then, I came back home and I just took a mundane job. Worked full time, and lately I've decided to start this YouTube channel. And I'm looking forward to my retirement, which is coming up in the next few years, a couple of 3 years. And when I retire, I'm going back to the desert in Arizona, at least for the winters. I sincerely hope that my story and my YouTube channel, my website, and the books that I'm writing will be of a benefit to you and help you in your own journey and your own path, and will lead you to a awakening experience similar to mine, so that you too will know what it's like to be blissful and at peace and know the true causes of joy and happiness in your own life. There's a sweet, effervescent aroma to awakening that is undisturbed and tranquil, and perceptions are broad, wide open. The field of awareness is unblemished and like a cloudless sky. And when you wake up, you realize that it's so simple, and that this awareness has always been with you. It's always been there in the background. This is one of the things the Buddhists will emphasize, Tibetan Buddhists will emphasize, is that Buddha nature, this awareness, what they also call Rigpa, is always with us. It's always there. Sufis say God is as close as your jugular vein. And I think the Tibetans would agree, because when you awaken, you realize that this sense of awareness has always been in the background. It's always been there. It's not unfamiliar. There's a shedding of thoughts that cloud your perception of the awareness, of your emotional entanglements, of your cravings, your desires, your attachments. And you gain a new understanding of the unity of all awareness, and the interdependence of all beings. So these are some of the things I thought I'd say, and I hope my story and my website and my efforts will be of benefit to you and everyone. Thanks for watching.